Okay, welcome back. This is week 4, video number 2. We're going to be looking at APA in-text citations in this particular video. And I'm going to be flipping through a number of different files on the screen. So it might be useful again to have full screen on so you can see exactly what I'm doing here. I'm just starting at our fake paper, so the fake paper that you downloaded last week. And I just wanted to show you what some in-text citations look like. So I'm going to go into the actual text of the fake paper of the assignment. And I just wanted to point out some of the in-text citations that are there. So if you can see where I'm highlighting these things in the bracket, all are in-text citations. And they look a little bit different each time that they appear. So sometimes I have names and years. Sometimes I have page numbers. I have all sorts of different variations of these in-text citations. And it's this variation that sometimes makes people a little bit nervous because you're going to do different things depending on the situation that you're in. But just like the references list, this follows a very definite pattern. So it's just about cracking the pattern and making sure that you understand and that you know the pattern to be able to identify what to do in terms of an in-text citation. So just to review from the last video, each time that you paraphrase material or each time that you direct quote material, you're going to need to include some type of APA in-text citation to identify where the information has come from. And it's very, very important that you do this every time that you're using research information so that you can protect yourself against an accusation of academic dishonesty. So very, very key. We're going to unlock the pattern in this video, and then we'll get some practice with it. Okay. So before you even get started, there's 3 big questions that you want to ask yourself each time you're writing a sentence. And your answers to these particular questions are going to guide you in terms of what to do in your bracket for the in-text citation. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, am I direct quoting or am I paraphrasing? You only have 2 possible answers there. Either you're direct quoting the information or you're paraphrasing the information. You then need to identify how many authors you have in the research source. There's only 3 possible answers to this question. You have 1, 2, or 3 plus. And then the final question you need to ask yourself to identify a pattern that you're going to be following is, am I using the author or authors' names in my sentence? Yes or no. Okay. Answering these 3 questions is going to identify what pattern it is you're going to follow for your APA in-text citation. So for example, if I'm direct quoting and I have 2 authors and I'm using their name in the sentence, I'm going to do one thing. But if I'm paraphrasing and I have 3 or more and I'm not using their names in the sentence, I'm going to do something else. So initially, when you're first starting with APA, you need to go a little slowly and ask yourself these questions each sentence that you're working on. That will, like I said, help you identify the pattern that you're going to follow for the information that you're going to put in the in-text citations. To make it easy to learn the pattern, I've actually made up what I like to call a little cheat chart on APA style that identifies a situation and then it shows you an example of what to do for APA in-text citations. We're going to get started first by talking about what to do with direct quotations. So remember, that's when we're giving information word for word for word. Over here on the one side, I have the situation that I'm in. And then over here on the other side, because it's easier to learn from example, I have an example of what to do in that particular situation. So let's get started. And we're first going to look at doing a direct quotation when you have one author. And we're going to take a look at the difference between what to do when we're using the author's name in the sentence versus not using the author's name in a sentence. If I'm going to use the author's name in the sentence, immediately following the author's name, in a bracket, I'm going to put in the year of publication, just the year. Okay, APA says only put in the year. And then after my quotation, after the words that I've actually taken word for word from that resource, I'm going to open up another bracket. I'm going to type in P period space, the page number that that quotation appears on, close the bracket. Okay, and you'll notice as well that the period comes outside the bracket. So I might say something like, according to Smith, 2007, quote, cancer is a very common disease, unquote, page 145. If I'm not going to use the name in my sentence, though, I'm going to do something slightly different. So if I were to write instead, certainly most people would agree that, quote, cancer is a very common disease, unquote, I'm going to put all my information in one big long bracket right at the end after the quotation. And I'm going to put it in the order of name, comma, year, comma, page number. So in this case, in the bracket, I would put Smith, comma, 2007, comma, P period space, page number, in this case 145, close the bracket, period. Okay, that's your basic pattern. So if you're using the author's name in your sentence, you're going to put the year of publication right after the author's name, and then you're going to put the page number right after the quotation. But if you're not using the author's name in your sentence, you're going to put everything in one long big bracket at the end. Let's move on. Let's make it a little more complicated. This time we're going to take a look at what to do when you have two authors. When you have two authors, again, you're going to do something slightly different when you're using the names in your sentence versus not using the names in your sentence. If I am going to use the author's name in my sentence, I'm going to put in both authors' names, and I'm going to include A and D between them. So I might say, according to Jones and Wagner, bracket, year of publication, close the bracket, comma, kidney failure is, quote, especially difficult for the senior population to deal with, unquote, bracket, P period, page number, close the bracket, period. But if I'm not using the author's names in my sentence, I'm going to put everything in a big long bracket at the end, just like I did with a single author. But instead of A and D, I need to use the ampersand, the and signal, in between the two different authors' names. So I might say something like kidney failure is, quote, especially difficult for the senior population to deal with, unquote. And then in my big long bracket at the end, I would put in author one's last name, ampersand, author two's last name, comma, year of publication, comma, P period space, page number, close the bracket, period. Okay, so quite simple. All we're doing is adding in an extra author. Note though, okay, when you're writing about them in your sentence, it's A and D between them. But if you're not writing about them in your sentence and you're doing everything in that big long bracket, it's an ampersand. If I have 3 or more authors, I get to take a shortcut. The shortcut is called the et al shortcut. So it's ET space AL period. And this is Latin, and translated into English, it means and others. The et al shortcut allows you to use the first author in the list's last name, and then to use et al to show that there are other authors as well. So in this case, if I were going to use the authors' names, let's say it was Smith, Jones, McDonald, and White. Okay, so I have 4 authors. I'm only going to list Smith, the first one in the list, in terms of the last name, and then I'm going to use et al to stand in for everybody else. So I might say, according to Smith et al, year of publication in the bracket, my quotation, then my page number in another bracket following my quotation. And I'm still following that same formula. Okay, so year of publication right after the author names, and then page number right after the quotation. But if I decide that I don't want to use those author names in my sentence, I'm going to go ahead and use that big bracket at the end right after my direct quotation. And I'm still going to use et al. So I'm going to list Smith et al. So ETAL period, comma, year of publication, comma, P period, page number, close the bracket, period. So this particular part of the chart covers everything you're going to do when you're direct quoting. Okay, so you need to know again how many authors you have and whether or not you're going to use those author names in your sentence or not. We're now going to switch over to paraphrasing, and paraphrasing is the second part of the chart that I've identified for you here. Paraphrasing is even easier than direct quoting in terms of doing the in-text citations because you're following the exact same pattern that you did, except you are not putting in the page number. So when you are paraphrasing, you never include the page number in your APA format. Let's take a look at some examples of paraphrasing. And we're going to start again with paraphrasing with a single author using that author's name in the signal phrase, okay, or in the sentence. So if I had written that Fraser believes that cancer can be cured with radiation treatment alone, I put my year of publication, in this case 2001, immediately after the author's last name. But if I don't include the author's last name in my sentence, if instead I had written one scientist believes that cancer can be cured with radiation treatment alone, I'm going to put the author's name and the year of publication in a bracket right at the end of the sentence. If I have two authors, if I'm using both the author's names in my sentence, I'm going to include author one's last name, AND, and then author two's last name, followed by the year of publication in a bracket. But if I'm not using their name in the sentence, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put everything into a big bracket at the end. And just like with direct quoting, I'm going to use the ampersand instead of AND between the two authors' names. If I'm paraphrasing and I have three or more authors, I'm going to use the et al. Shortcut, just as I did with direct quoting. So in this case, if I'm using the author's names in my sentence, I might say McKelvey et al., year of publication, and then go into my paraphrase. But if my paraphrase does not use the author's name in the sentence, I'm going to put everything in a big long bracket at the end. So in this case, I have McKelvey et al., 2007. Okay. You can use this chart when you're writing, and in fact, most of my students do, to remind yourself of the example until you actually get a hang of the pattern. So eventually you'll find that you don't need to look up what to do in each particular instance, that it becomes second nature. But when you're first starting, it's important to take it slow and make sure that you're looking at each sentence that you're writing and go back and make sure that you're answering those three questions and then following the example based on the scenario or the situation that you're in. Okay. Another question that comes up, and this is a little more advanced, is about how to handle citations within citations. So sometimes you'll have a research source and they'll be using APA themselves. So they'll be referencing different people that they have looked up and the work that they have used. If you have an indirect reference, you're going to include an entry for the source that you have in hand in your references list. But when you're actually writing, you're going to credit the original source, adding the words as cited in to show that you quoted a secondary source rather than the original. So, for example, if I had a resource that was written by Jones in 2005, but Jones had referenced Smith 2001 in his or her article, I would write Smith 2001, then my paraphrase, and then at the end of my paraphrase, I'd open up another bracket and I'd use the words as cited in, then the name of my original, Jones, comma, followed by a year of publication. Okay, so just be careful if you're using information that your original author has also used from somewhere else. You want to make sure that you handle that as a citation within a citation. Okay, that was a lot of information to go through. Take a few minutes, take a bit of a break. In our next video, we're actually going to practice doing some APA in-text citations. You might want to keep this particular file, the APA cheat chart, on your computer. So open it up as a file so that you can use it as we're working through the example. And we'll come back in our next video and get some practice.